The very first turn comes for a centering pass from Jack Williams. The distance is just a little further and is completely comfortable, about 15 to 18 metres. You can see from the lower angle that with the throw and going form, Williams just shows a little bit too much of the underside of the disc to the sky, and it turns over and pops over Carolyn Finney's head. After centering to Carolyn Normile, Dylan Freechild strikes deep. Spiegel rightly calls for help, and Hernschmeyer leaves his assignment in the stack. Freechild recognises this poach and stops his cut, but as he looks up, he sees that Normile's already put the deep shot out. He restarts his cut, but is never going to get to the disc. The first couple of passes, when your vert stack is perfectly formed, is when the defenders are at their most aware, as their matchup is probably hanging out on the vert stack for a few passes. The decision from Normile is much too risky. This turn opens up the floodgates for a turn-fest point. Here, Germany run their 1-6 vert stack, which is their slow sideline start initiating set play, isolating Garner at the front. She offers a tricky upline pass, and Spiegel takes it on, but puts it a bit too far in front. Garner could put a bid in here, but is maybe deterred by the pressure from Trope, who reads the play well and poaches into the upline space. It's now 2 turns from the set play, with a third from Spiegel in a similar situation. Both the Canadians and the Americans figured out this set play instantly, and either doubled Garner or poached onto her after she began cutting. If you're the German coaching staff, it's got to be back to the drawing board on this set play. They should go to a plan B to start from the sideline. At the very least, they should take Spiegel away from the throwing role in this set play, because his decisions and execution in this spot has left a lot to be desired.
They said they had 7 turnovers. The O-line had 7 turnovers in yesterday's game.
The Germans run this set play twice more this point. Once it works as planned because the Americans are all too gassed to poach. The second time, every cut is well covered by the Americans, and Schlor has to rip down this skyball. It's not the sort of option you can trust to come off every time. More evidence to rethink this going forward.
Freechild is cutting down a pretty narrow lane. Schlor sees the cut, poaches off his inactive mark Lindsley, and gets the disc ahead of Freechild. A very aware, very well executed poach D from Schlor.
Torben Hernschmeyer looks for the inside but puts it a bit too far out in front, with Freechild cleaning up with the D. This throw is pretty risky and not for a whole lot of gain, so it should probably be faked to open up a cut for Garner into the centre of the field.
Or an even easier option is for Hernschmeyer to look back to Katharina Schulze in the middle of the field, who should be ready for the return pass.
A simple throwaway from Freechild here, putting it over Kayla Helton's head, and Grant Lindsley can't quite get there in time. Garner makes a poor decision here. The Germans have been struggling to get free, so Garner tries to stretch it deep with a huck to Konrad Schlor. The huck shape is all wrong here. Just before the huck you see Schlor looking over his right, not his left shoulder as you would expect.
Even a better huck would likely be taken down by Trope, whose defensive positioning makes a huck unviable.
Trope sends an around backhand to Lindsley, who's plenty free enough, but Wolchak's loose mark is in the perfect place to force this throw high and wide. After an incredible huck reception, Schlor is careless with the dish into the end zone. Trope puts up a nice crossfield flick to Lindsley, but he doesn't quite box out as well as he needs to, and as the edge of the disc flattens out and starts to fade IO, Schlor gets up and gets a great athletic D. Then Germany jacks it deep and Normile gets the D, then Kayla Helton jacks it deep and Opie Payne can't quite make the play, then Spiegel jacks it deep and Nate Goff and Lindsley switch and Lindsley gets the D. Then the Americans work it up the whole length of the pitch. Freechild gets free on the front line, but Schlor poaches off Nate Goff and distracts Freechild's catch. Really, Kayla Helton should find the throw to Goff at the back of the end zone. Germany call a timeout and try to calm it down, but Spiegel turns it on another huck. This time the decision is good, but the execution lets him down. Lindsley finally puts this 14 turnover point to rest. Jimmy Mickle's huck is a little floaty, and it gives Lena Trautman the opportunity to claw back the yards and make the play. You can understand Maxroth's desire to stay a step away from the disc to give herself a run up for the skyball, but this distance leaves a lane for Trautman to get involved. Lindsley's flick is a bit too high, Trope doesn't make the grab, a classic shared responsibility execution turnover. For the first time in the tournament, Stefan Dershaw ventures away from the backhand and throws a couple flicks. It's the decision, not really the execution, that lets him down here though. Trope is doing a great job of defending Trautman, and Dershaw should look infield for another option. Another sick D from Trautman. This Trope-Trautman matchup is won by the defense again. Maxroth overshoots Mickle on the upline. Spiegel does extremely well to close Mickle down and make the throw difficult. If Maxroth wants to throw this, she's got to lead it out a lot earlier. The disc sails past Mickle and into the hands of Vollvogel, and he punts it deep. Really poor execution on the huck, far too much of the disc shown to the air, and the disc sits high in the air, lots of jostling underneath, and Kocha comes down with it. Neither team really wants the disc. Mickle throws a weird flick to the backhand side. Helton halts her cut, and Nikki Prien gets there first. Sometimes these strange choices on throwing portray a tentativeness with the decision. There's something about the option that the thrower doesn't really like, but it's not enough to put them off throwing it altogether. There's a similar effect with a really fast zipped throws. If the situation requires a really fast throw, it might be better just to look it off and find an easier option. Chastain plays the aggressive inside line on the upline cut and is rewarded when Prien's throw is a little bit behind Levka and Chastain makes a great clean block. Finney catches the disc, travels into power position by changing direction as she's slowing down, and fires deep for Mickle. The huck blades quickly and dives into the ground before Mickle can get to it. Another fantastic defensive effort by Chastain, stealing the disc away from Wolchak. The disc from Mueller is not quite as leading as it could be, and as Wolchak pulls up, Chastain capitalizes. After half, Vollvogel is striking deep from the handler space. Mueller takes the shot as Vollvogel has plenty of separation on Mickle, but Kocha poaches from the back of the sack to get there first and smacks the disc to the ground.
The degree of difficulty on this throw is already very high, and it's not clear that Vollvogel would get to the disc even in a world where Kocha didn't poach off the back.
Deep cuts like this, where the cutter starts from the handler space or the front of the stack, simply invite in a poach D. The length of cut gives plenty of time for the defenders to recognise the threat, and the long, spaced out stack puts defenders in the perfect position to get to the deep shot first. Germany have turned this way a few times now, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense because it's so obvious how adept they are at gaining yards through more shorter passes, but they don't need to take these deep shots as frequently as they do. After many swings where the American offense isn't really going anywhere, Finney gets the disc unmarked and sends a long pass to Maxroth. Maxroth gets a hand to it but can't quite bring it down. Mueller's inside flick is behind Dershaw and Mickle gets there first. I'm really not a fan of the decision for this throw. This 15-meter inside to the front of the sack is an option that traditional ultimate teaches you is worth taking, but in my experience is super risky. The margin of error on this throw is tiny. The ideal shot is maybe only a couple foot further towards Dorshaw's right shoulder, and Mueller has to rifle the disc hard to get there in time. Just take the swing to Garner and live to fight another day.
Another shared execution turnover here. Samuel Boitermüller is going to back himself to catch this disc 9 times out of 10, but Garner should do better to make this an easier catch.
The final turn is on a Carolyn Normile huck. Trope slightly overruns the disc. She just barely gets a fingertip to the disc, and Trautman is just able to pull up in time as well so she doesn't commit a foul. Germany work the disc down the field, and a long pass from Schlor to Spiegel seals the deal for Germany to beat the US. Let's talk takeaways.
For the Germans, they are the giant killers, taking down the 4-time defending champions.
A massive and shocking win for Team Germany. We knew they were good after they beat the Canadians, but to translate that into another comfortable victory against the Americans was seriously impressive. There were some standout performances for the Germans. I think Lena Trautman played an immense game, skying Maxroth and putting pressure on Trope for 2Ds. Schlor had a great game too, and Garner and Mueller were great when the German offense settled in the second half. On the American side, I think Chastain is one of the few Americans who had a good game. There were a lot of turns in this game, 30 turns between the two sides. I thought Tom Stiles, who was on commentary for this game, made a good point about how expansive the Americans were, and taking on those 15 to 30 meter shots that can be a lot riskier than they look. The expansiveness also means you've got to run a lot, and the Americans looked tired in this game, more so than the Germans, I thought. In general, a lot of risk was taken on by both sides. I would reiterate my point about Germany's initiation play from the sideline. That whole system was an offensive liability. It's not like the Germans played a particularly clean game here at all. I think the defensive pressure and smart awareness as well as the Americans' offensive errors contributed more to the scoreline.
That's the only option they have, is a deep shot. Is it going to work out?
This is the last pool play game we're going to look at. The first semi, USA vs Colombia, is already up on YouTube, and the next video we will see is the Germans facing off against the Australians in the other semi. I'll see you then.
Shot, and it's going to be reeled in by Andrews on the far side, just in bounds.
First blood goes to